Okay, we'll try that. Okay, so, all right, welcome everybody here. Those of you who are in the house and those who are joining with us online for our midweek study this week. As a heads up for those in the room and those who might be joining with us there online, we are still trying to determine whether next week we will have our study or not. Sam and Sharon and myself and Kel will be at our Assemblies of God General Council in Florida next week. So it may work out better to just take a break for the week. So that way so much doesn't fall on Pastor Ray, and Julian's willing to teach, but we'll see. Just logistically, that might be a little bit easier to just take the Wednesday off next week. So we'll let you know through text, all that good stuff as we move forward, okay? So I want to say a big congratulations. They didn't know I was going to say this, but Sam and Sharon have passed their credential exams. Okay. So now the interviews are left. So as long as they don't fumble the ball here going into the end zone, we should be good. Fortunately, I know one of the people that does the interviews, so I know him very well. No, I'm just kidding. I as a presbyter, I am responsible for the credential interviews, but I recuse myself when it's somebody this close to us, like when Pastor Ray received his credentialing. I was not one of the interviewees that was active at the table, so I will do the same in this case, but it's definitely those tests are not easy, I will tell you. They challenge you. Now, they do help you, if you study, you can turn a corner on, just like any test, right? If you put the work in, you can see a good result. And they put the work in, and so it was really good to see that. Sam finished up yesterday. So, and Sharon did a couple weeks prior, or a week prior, whatever it was. So congratulations, you two. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
They had to take 3 tests, by the way.
Back to back to back.
Sam,
Back to back to back.
Sam did better on 2 of them. So Sam was the smarter of these 2.
Extra long to study. That's true.
Sam had more time to study, right? So they take a Bible knowledge exam that is all over the map on random facts, theological facts, all of those kind of things. Then they take a doctrine exam, and that dives into Christian doctrine, AG doctrine, all of those good things, terminology, all of that stuff, our 16 fundamentals of the Assemblies of God, all of those things. They have to know those things. And then there's a polity exam, which, if you're not familiar with the word polity, it's basically just our governing structure. How do we, as the Assemblies of God, govern ourselves? And so that one is arguably the most difficult, because most of us enjoy studying the Word. Most of us enjoy learning those kind of things. But when you plop down in front of somebody a Constitution and bylaws that's this thick, and your job is to read through Constitution and bylaws and understand the structure of, or the flow of the structure within the leadership team and how it all works, and ministerial, approving, but also discipline things and all of that stuff, it's all wrapped up in there. It's a lot to take in. So they did well. So just so you're aware, all right? And that's a good thing. We want to see people grow. The goal is that we're maturing and we're growing in our call. We're growing in what God has asked us to do. We're growing in our maturity. We're growing in our knowledge. If we're stagnant, if we're not the same person, or if we're not a different person a year from now than we are today, then we need to look at what our pursuit is, because Jesus continually draws us deeper. He continually draws us into revelation of himself through his word, through his spirit, in prayer time. He continually allows us to understand more of what we call our faith and how it works and how he interacts with us and his character and his glory and his majesty. And let me let you know, we can learn something new every single day until he takes us home, and still have yet to scratch the surface of all that God is, all that he's done, and all that he has. So if you think you've arrived Boy, oh boy. I just pray the Lord opens your eyes, because the farther, it's like Paul, the Apostle Paul, the further he walked in intimacy with the Lord, the more he began to declare, I'm the chief of sinners. I'm the farthest from anybody that should be in this role. And there's this beautiful thing as we mature in Christ, as we grow in Jesus, we recognize how far we really are from his majesty and his glory, and that the grace of God abounds all the more. You see, when we get a greater perspective of the holiness of God and how pure and righteous and mighty and powerful he is above all creation, and yet he chooses to beckon us into himself and walk with us and cover our faults, cover our sin, and still call us his own, that causes the grace of God to be viewed in an enormous capacity, rather than maybe very simple ways that we initially begin to understand the grace of God. Does that make sense? So there is a purpose for our growth in Christ. All right, so all of us be encouraged tonight. All right, I spoke a couple weeks ago on a Sunday. If you remember, forget what I titled it, but I just kept coming back to that phrase, the wet feet faith. You remember that? And I kept messing it up, wet feet faith. Oh, I don't know. A couple Sundays ago.
A couple Sundays ago? Okay.
Faith, was it Faith in Action? Okay, it was titled Faith in Action, but in that message, I kept circling back to that phrase, wet feet faith, because it was the story in Joshua 3 where the Lord had given them instruction on carrying the ark out into the water, and then he stopped up the Jordan, and everybody passed through on dry ground. Okay, but it wasn't until their feet actually touched the water that the miracle took place, and that was where the challenge was to have the wet feet faith. So I'm going to continue a little bit following that story tonight, because one thing that's really become I wouldn't say a focal point, a favorite of mine, is the book of Joshua. All right, the record of Joshua. When we talk about the record, the book of Joshua, what things come to mind?
Joshua and the Battle of Jericho.
Joshua, the Battle of Jericho. Okay. Enormous battle. Matter of fact, I just said to somebody the other day, we were joking about killing flies in the admin office at camp, and one of the worship leaders didn't want to participate. He was joking, but he's like, what did he say? I'm a Levite. He was a musician. He's not a warrior. And I challenged him. I said, that's not true at all. And I said, what about the Battle of Jericho? Music was used to bring the walls down. And he goes, oh, and so I was just challenging him a little bit on his theology, but it was pretty fun. But so at Jericho, you see this completely God-ordained moment, right? God did the work. Nobody could say it was by their sheer voices that the width of Jericho fell. Like the width of their walls was so wide they could ride chariots side by side on top of it. All right, so that was an act of God. All right, what else? When we say the book of Joshua, what else comes to mind?
Me and my house will serve.
Yes, one of my favorite verses. It's near the end as Joshua has called the people back, right? We're going to actually talk about that a little bit later. And it's at Shechem where they recommit themselves to the Lord. And Joshua says, you decide for yourselves, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, right? That's an incredible declaration from the leader who took over from who? Moses. So Joshua was the one that the Lord had anointed to take over and actually lead the people into the promised land, while Moses did not get to. Okay? What else? What's another thing you think of in Joshua?
One of my favorites is Joshua 1:9. Very strong, courageous.
Yeah, repeated over and over. Mm-hmm.
I'll be with you wherever you go.
Yep. Joshua, that story is incredible because he encounters a heavenly warrior. And he goes, who are you for, us or them? And he goes, neither. Which is an incredible perspective, by the way, when you think about a warrior, a heavenly warrior who has this eternal perspective that there were lives in Jericho that certainly God could have reached and certainly had a plan to through his people and to avail himself. There was the priest of Salem, Melchizedek, who was not of the people of Israel, but was tithed to by Abraham. So he was clearly a man after God's own heart. So there were people on the earth that were seeking God. And God's heart was not to destroy people in this case, but this was an act of the promises of God in taking the land. And so when he says, "Who are you for?" and the warrior says, "Neither," that's a pretty strong statement. He's not necessarily, in that case, an enemy of the people of Jericho, nor is he an enemy of the people of the Lord, though God certainly uses moments of judgment, as we will actually see on Sunday. I'm preaching from a book I've never preached before, so it's going to be incredible. I think God's got something in it for us. It's going to be neat. But, okay, so we got be strong and courageous, right? All right, the warrior. What else? What else comes to mind?
The sun standing still.
The sun standing still so they can finish pursuing them. Okay, that's pretty dynamic. All right, that the Lord didn't let, could you imagine living on the earth in that day? Like, why isn't the sun moving? Like, you're nowhere near that battle. There's people all over the globe at this point, and people are going, what's going on? The sun's not setting. Or the sun's not rising if you were on the other side.
Extra hours.
What is going on? Where's the sun? Okay.
The whole bag.
That's and in addition to that, hailstones from heaven are lobbed down. Like, the Lord's up there just dropping them on people. Like, good luck dodging that. Okay. What else? What else comes to mind?
Rahab. Oh, sorry.
Yeah?
Rahab, and just like the story of how God invited someone outside of
Yep.
God's people to be a
Yep.
part of that journey.
And not only that, but she becomes what? She becomes part of what?
The lineage.
The lineage of Christ.
Yeah.
So not only did God use her, but in that faith, she becomes one in the line of faith. Isn't that amazing? Woo! That's a great story. What else?
Kind of take a different lens on it. People often criticize the book of Joshua as like this big, massacre, genocide. They throw those words kind of around, which we know not to be true. But that is often something I hear online about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is an interesting conversation because where the Lord says to wipe them out, there is further evidence later on beyond this book that those people still exist. So we have to look at what the style of writing was in this day, and in that Mesopotamian writing of that era, if you look at Babylonian writings and Persian writings and all of those kind of things, there is an affinity for this hyperbolic language. So the Lord is making a clear direction that they should be displaced and conquered, but to be slaughtered completely, that they would never rise again, doesn't appear to be true in the history that has followed. Okay, so we're left with this interesting take on the writing style of the ancient Mesopotamian area with the fulfillment of God's command to conquer the land. And the truth lies right there in the middle of that, okay? So that's a great one. What else? Anybody? What about disobedience? And I'm just highlighting some stuff because it's going to go, we're going to talk before most of that other stuff happens. But what about Achan's sin in the Battle of Ai? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the immediate following story after Jericho. They come off of this incredible battle victory where they see God do something, and then they go up against Ai and they get slaughtered because Achan had taken and hidden some of the treasure that was meant for the Lord. And then the Lord deals pretty seriously with that family, if you remember how that works. The earth opens up, whoop, goodbye.
Got a question.
Yeah.
God killed his whole family when only he did it. Why?
Well, there's lots that could happen in that conversation, but it's an idea of ending that line. There was wickedness, and he was the head of the home. Certainly, some of the family might have known. His wife might have been complicit in it. Lots of different ways that we could look at that. But those kind of questions, while they are hard to answer, can also breed that feeling that Sam was talking about just a second ago about this viciousness of God. Who would want to follow a God that would kill the whole family over this scenario? The other part is it's similar to So we have to guard that, by the way. But it's similar to Ananias and Sapphira, where the Lord is making a very serious declaration right away. I'm not playing around. I gave you a direction, and you took what was set apart unto the Lord. Just like Ananias and Sapphira kept what was set apart unto the Lord. They had said, we're giving this to God, but they kept it. They were deceiving people, and God made a quick statement, and awe captured the church in the book of Acts. It says that they were all filled with fear and awe of the Lord, and the similar result happens here as a result of Achan's judgment. The people of God go, oh, okay, all right. We're not doing, so unfortunately there is a complexity to that conversation, okay? All right, anybody else?
I think like in regards to the Battle of Ai, I was in Europe, and this came up with like other fellow believers, Battle of Ai, and how like God gives strategy to Joshua, and that's just like he continues to do that throughout a lot of Joshua, give like Joshua specific strategy. But I think that's so cool because like we were doing street evangelism and talking about how like we have to have strategy and we have to like rely on the Lord for that strategy. And so I feel like this book is a lot of Joshua leaning into like the strategy that God's giving him.
Absolutely. That's a great perspective, because this book is full of the Lord giving instruction to Joshua and Joshua carrying over instruction that had already been given to Moses. All right, so there's this idea that just because this instruction or this idea was given to a leader before us doesn't mean that it's outdated or wrong either. Right, there's this idea, what story was it where they had gone and they redug the wells?
Jacob.
Was that Abraham?
Yeah.
And they had redug, I forget who it was, but they had redug wells that had been filled in. And there's this idea that previous generations had dug wells of faithfulness in our journey with Christ, and in processes and plans and disciplines in our faith that we have filled in favor of an easier road, or we can get to the same result with our own tools. And we're recognizing that we're now limp because of it, because we have filled in those wells that were dug for a purpose. And so Joshua didn't fill in the well of knowledge and instruction that Moses handed down to him. Joshua ensured that that was carried out in the division of the land and the conquest and everything that needed to take place. Joshua upheld that direction. And so there's something vital to that, thinking about those that have gone before us, that have blazed a trail and set a process and given some encouragement. We shouldn't fill those wells in. We should listen and hold up what God has spoken even to those before us. I think that's a valuable piece. And yes, Joshua does receive very specific instruction throughout this word, okay? Or through this book. All right, so let's dive in now. Great answers, great response. Let's see if we can move through this. Joshua chapter 4. All right, so this is immediately following the faith in action scenario I preached about a couple weeks ago, where the priests bring the ark down into the Jordan. This is the crossing, all right? Joshua chapter 3. This is the big moment. This is the moment where God has opened the doorway for the people of Israel to cross into the promised land he had given. Now, there was a previous generation that had died away. They had wandered in the desert. And this generation is crossing over in response to. Now, keep in mind, this generation crossing over, they would have been children at best at the covenant at Sinai. So the generation before them would have been the ones who said, we will do this. We will follow God. We will, under Moses' leadership. Now, this generation under Joshua, at best, were children in that scenario. It was 40 years of wandering in the desert. So this generation now is being led across, and God does this incredible miracle to launch them in by stacking up the Jordan River at a town up the way. You remember, the priest stood there in the middle holding the ark. The whole assembly of people passed through. And so we pick this up in Joshua chapter 4, verse 1. I'll begin, and then we'll hand it off for others to read. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So here we see another piece of instruction given to Joshua. I mean, we're 4 chapters, three full chapters deep, and there's multiple engagements where Joshua's already received specific instruction from the Lord. So the first thing we want to see, and I'm going to use a little bit of visual aid here tonight, because I did a research project and a whole presentation on this, so I brushed it off because it just felt like this is where God was leading us tonight. So the first thing we need to understand here is this: the Lord who gave this instruction for memorial. It's the Lord who gave this instruction to pick up these stones, right? God initiated the action of this, what would be memorial. This is not the first time, though, that God instructs the passing down of faith and stories of God's ways, his faithfulness, his provision, and his miracles. Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 8. Somebody, let's jump over to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 8.
You're a wizard. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Okay, so this scripture should sound familiar. Where did you hear it recently?
Service.
When?
Sunday.
This past Sunday. All right. This was the foundational text for family matters this past week. Okay? This is the Lord giving instruction on handing down these precepts of faith, not only in instruction, but also in ways of memorializing it, seeing it, recognizing it, keeping it with you. Okay? So let's skip ahead to chapter 11, verses 18 to 21. This is Deuteronomy 11, verses 18 to 21. And here's Moses, again, giving instruction as the Lord gives it to him. So somebody go ahead and read that out. 18 to 21.
Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Mm-hmm. Should I keep going?
It's essentially the same thing, but look at read 21.
So that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land of the Lord, the Lord swore to give your ancestors, as many as the days as the heavens are above the earth.
All right, so we see two instances where the very, very similar instruction is repeated by Moses by way of the Lord. By the Lord by way of Moses, okay? And it even speaks about in the land that he has promised to give them. Now, fast forward, since that moment, they're now entering into that land. And here's another moment where God is saying, set this up as a memorial. So this idea emphasizes that the events were done in accordance with the Lord's direction. So the priest responding and grabbing these stones from the river show and reflect in obedience, not only by Joshua, but by the people who are now following Joshua. Remember, Moses has passed away. Joshua's the new leader. They're stuck now with this idea, are we going to follow Joshua? Who is this guy? So right off the bat, Joshua, the Lord is proving that he is speaking to Joshua and the Lord's ways are coming to pass. And so this emphasizes the obedience as they pick up these rocks and they walk them out of the center of the river. All right, so let's pick up with verses 2 and 3, which I just read to you. Right, so 12 men from among the people. So one man from each of the 12 tribes. Okay, is tasked with picking up the stone. So each tribe took a stone from the place and time when the miracle took place. I should have used a different word there, where the miracle happened. This is an engaging moment for each part of Israel in the testimony. All of them passed through the miracle. All of them could give testimony that they looked at a flooding, because the river Jordan is at flood stage. They looked at a flooding river that was stopped up by the Lord. I don't know if you've ever tried to stop a flowing body of water, but it finds a way to get around what you tried to stop it with, especially when it's at flood stage. So this is a miracle. They're all walking through next to the priest holding the ark, looking at dry ground that was at flood stage moments before. Every single tribe passed through the miracle. And so grabbing a hold of this stone and bringing them through engages each member of Israel in the testimony. These large stones have been used to commemorate past events as reminders before. Look at Genesis 28:18. This is not a new thing with God. Genesis 28:18. Somebody flip over there.
Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it.
And then he called that place Bethel.
Yep.
All right? So there was a moment here where Jacob had an encounter with God, and the stone with which he laid his head to sleep, he stands up as a memorial, as a monument, and he anoints it with oil. All right? Look at Genesis 35, verse 14. A few chapters later. Jacob returns back to that same place, Bethel. Okay, somebody read 14.
Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it.
So he sets up another one where God comes and speaks with him at Bethel. And so not only did he set up the one where he had the dream, but he sets up the one that says, God spoke to me here. Right? So these serve as points. Can you imagine Jacob and his family walking by this place, Bethel? Every time they passed by, he goes, that's the stone. Dad, is that the stone where you had the dream? Yep, that's the one. Oh, is that the one where you talked with the Lord? Yep, that's the one. Can you imagine being able to point those things out and refer to those things throughout your life, throughout your experience, throughout your testimony as you move forward? So stones taken from the riverbed is a powerful wording to illustrate that the river had indeed stopped flowing. How else could they grab the stones? Unless the river had removed itself and they were able to grab them, this is a visual indication not only that they passed on dry ground, but that they could locate stones from the center of the river. It was, again, dried enough for the stones to be harvested. This is part of the testimony as each tribe selects a stone. All right? So now, Joshua chapter 4, verse 4. Somebody go ahead and read that.
Just verse 4?
Yeah, let's read a little. Oh, if I move this, let me see. Yeah, you can read through 6 and 7.
So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever.
Whoa. All right, these stones are meant to be memorial. They're meant to be something that they tell their children and their children tell their children about. All right, so did you catch something in there that was unique? When Joshua gave them instruction right off the beginning, did you see anything in there that would have seemed like a challenge to the people, those 12 individuals?
On his shoulder?
Well, the shoulder for me indicates that they're pretty heavy. They had to get them up on their shoulder, okay? But just before that, he says, go over before the ark. So for me, they're going literally as the ark is going out into, and the water has stopped flowing, and they're going to the place where the presence of the Lord is standing before the ark. They're literally grabbing the stones from around the feet of the priests, going before the ark. They're going to grab them from where the presence of the Lord was standing in the middle of the river. They're going to the place, again, of testimony. They're going to that place to say, these stones didn't just come out of the river. These stones came from the place where God stood to stop the river. Okay? So now moving forward, it's used as the sign. So the first thing we understand is that each tribe was given the instruction to take 12 stones to Joshua. Then Joshua obeys. He responds in action. He obeys the Lord and sets to work addressing the people to lead through this spiritually impactful moment. So this is not a victorious moment. This is a monumental moment. This is not the battle of Jericho to come or any of those kind of moments where he's leading as a military leader. He's leading today in this moment as a spiritual leader. So he's reflecting the leading of God through his leadership. So when we think about our leadership, are we reflecting the Spirit of the Lord in our leadership? Now, whether we think we're all leaders or not, that's something we need to evaluate, because we're all leading somebody. Think about it. We're all leading somebody. We might have younger siblings, we might have friends, we might have coworkers, we might have family members, we might have spouses, we might have children. There's a variety of individuals in the proximity of our lives, each one of us, that we can be leading. Whether you feel like you're anointed as a leader or not, you have an opportunity to lead spiritually from the place where God is, from the place of encounter with the presence of the Lord. Okay? So we, like Joshua, can be obedient in that leading. As God directs, we step, we obey, we instruct, we teach. All right? So looking at verses 6 and 7, he talks about, Joshua gives the explanation of what these stones are for. So when he calls the 12 and he tells them what to do, he doesn't just give them, hey, just blindly listen to me. He tells them, this is the reason we're doing this. And the reason is multi-generational. Our obedience should be aimed at being faithful to the call of God so that the next generation has an example. Not only is our obedience aimed at saying, Lord, here I am, I'm yours, but if we're thinking long term that we're handing down family matters, this is how we as a family, as a home, as a community, this is how we follow God. There should be this explanation. Why does it matter? Because we want them to hear, we want them to know, we want them to see with their eyes somebody who stood where the presence of God was and said, I'm going that way. I'm going to be obedient when he leads. Right? So Joshua gives an explanation of the purpose. It's a sign for the future generations, much like the testimony of our life should be. It's a focal point about the testimony of God's faithfulness and provision. Can your life be a focal point of testimony? And we might sit here and go, I've never had these crazy wins like God separating the Jordan for me. No, but you might have a testimony of faithfulness through trial that speaks just as loud. You might have a testimony through the midst of tragedy that somebody can look at and say, that person in the midst of tragedy stood in faithfulness because of God. The testimony may just be that. So these stones would serve as a memorial forever. Remembering was a way for future generations to participate in the testimony of what God had done for Israel. This is something I think there's opportunity for us to be better at this, better in this as a church, is giving testimony of what God is doing and what he's providing so that future generations can say, look, I was there. I heard my mom talk about that. I heard my dad talk about that. I watched their life change. I was a partaker of the blessing of God. And that testimony is handed down now. And we're coming to a point, by the way, where some of the grandiose testimonies of a generation or two ago in our country are starting to wane. Some of the great moves of God that launched the sweeping of the Spirit across this country in the early 1900s some of those testimonies are starting to be trickled out of rotation by generations that no longer know God. We have to be protectors of the monument, protectors of what God has done in our life, so the next generation can see the torch. All right? Now let's move on. Chapter 4, verse 10. Somebody go ahead and read that. Just read verse 10 for now.
Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over.
Okay, so what we see here is that the people did not obey in mind and heart only, but in deed, as they get busy fulfilling the instruction of the Lord. This is an intricate piece to our obedience. We may launch out in a moment of prayer, we may launch out in a service or an emotional moment, we're responding to the presence of God, and we say, I'm going to do it. And we commit in our heart and a mind, but our feet never follow. This is something that happens here, is their feet do follow. They actually get busy. They do it indeed. And so I just want to challenge us too by looking at this model that's taking place as God is steering the leader and the people and the other leaders as they pick up the stones and all of those kind of things. There is deeds that are enacted, not just a commitment in heart and mind. We've got to be a people who obey, not just in heart and mind, but in deed. When we as people of God obey in action, it sets the stage for God to show His might and faithfulness. If all we are is obedient in our hearts and minds, but nobody can ever see obedience acted out, how can God ever reveal His glory, and how can we ever stand as a physical testimony if nobody can read our hearts and minds? There has to be a physical outflow of the change to say, look what God did. At some point, we have to trust God in action, because it is the stage for which God shows His might and His faithfulness. And today, we still need to learn this active obedience. We can take note from this generation that's following Joshua across the river. Joshua has, by virtue of Moses leading and the handing down of the baton of leadership, Joshua has set the vision. They're going across. The Lord has met them there. And it's a dynamic thing that the new leader is so infused with the might of God because of the obedience in the moment that God shows up and goes, this is an actual word that I gave him. This is actual vision and direction that I'm providing, and God sustains it and gives the glory in the process as obedience takes place. And I think when we finally begin to step in obedience, we'll see the same things take place as we trust God. All right. Now, in verse 18, we also see in verse 10 that the priests remained patiently standing in the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded was finished. Right? They were faithful until the job was complete. I think there's an element of that in our obedience too, is are we faithful till it's done? Sometimes we run out of steam. Sometimes we get tired of holding things. Sometimes we get tired of waiting. But if God has not removed the burden, the job is not done. They were standing until the job was finished. And then as they left, if you look in verse 18, somebody go ahead and read verse 18.
And the priests came up out of the river carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at the flood stage as before.
Okay, this wording is pretty brilliant, because the beginning process was the priest getting their feet wet. And when their feet touched the water, that's when the miracle happened. In this case, it's the reverse. As soon as their feet leave the water, the river returns to its previous stage. the awe of that moment had to have been dynamic to see the water just rush back in as a testimony to the reality that it was God that was holding it. This wasn't some natural circumstance. This wasn't some happening of nature. This was by the ordination of God. As their feet left the water, God allowed it to return. It was leaving no doubt that this was God leading them into the promised land. So, finally, in verse 20 and 21, we see what takes place here. Somebody read that.
And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones that they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, "In the future, when your descendants ask their parents, 'What do these stones mean?'
Oh, sorry, keep going.
Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground.
Keep going.
For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over." All
right. That's all right. So we see the job is complete, but it's the Lord's hand that moved the whole thing. So here, the previous time when Joshua was instructing, he was instructing who about future generations? Everybody remember?
The 12.
The 12. Remember, he called the 12. He said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go get this stone from before the ark, and you're going to take it across, and this is going to become a memorial for future generations. He was speaking to 12 at that point. So they got the vision. They carried it out. They finished it. The priest completed the task. All is done. They have finished the crossing into the promised land. They are now standing on the dry ground on the other side in the promised land. Now Joshua addresses the people. And he says, by the way, these stones right here, now he says the same thing he told the 12, says this is what they're for. Just like God delivered your parents, the previous generation, from the Egyptians coming through the Red Sea, he has now delivered you and I across this river into the promised land. Here is another deliverance of the Lord that has taken place, and they set the monument up so that they can tell the story for the future generations. Now, if you read the rest of Joshua, you recognize that there is a need, by the way, to keep coming back to that monument to remind themselves of what God had done. Because as they begin to scatter and go conquer land, some choose their own way, some bicker, there's fighting that takes place and arguing that takes place, and Joshua has to settle things, and some doubt and disbelief come in. Then Caleb comes in, he's like, I'm as strong as I was when I was a young man. I'm going to go take the land. He's this old dude out there like, I'll do it. And I love that, right? But at the very end of the book, they come back to Shechem. So if you look forward in the book, the eastern tribes return home. There was 2.5 tribes that didn't cross the Jordan, okay? They went back, but Joshua told them, and Moses told them, that's fine, but you have to come help clear the land, and then you can return back, all right? Now, in chapter 24, this is when the incredible moment takes place. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. After all this has taken place, the mighty testimony and the ups and downs and the obedience and the disobedience and the goings and comings of all the people and everything that takes place, Joshua calls them back to an assembly at Shechem. This is this generation's covenant at Sinai. Remember, the previous generation of fighting men and older people that were delivered, the adults that were delivered out of Egypt through the Red Sea, they had died away in the desert. Because of their doubt and disbelief, God did not allow them to cross over. So they wandered the desert for 40 years. They were the ones who made the covenant at Sinai. This moment at Shechem is the recommitment to that same covenant by this generation. And it's a moment that Joshua calls them forward. The job has been complete. They have entered the land. They have come to the place where God has ordained them to be. Now don't let go of God. Don't let go of God. And that's exactly what happens when Joshua and his leaders die. That's exactly what happens. And the very reason they set up the monument was so that that wouldn't, so they would continue to talk about the faithfulness of God. And they drift away, and you get into the book of Judges, and you see that each one does what was good in their own eyes. There was no king that led them. Joshua and his leadership had died, and now everybody did as they saw fit. And it just goes haywire. So for us, though we do not live in the time frame of patriarchal Israel, or even the years immediately following, and we may not traverse spans of land by foot or conquer cities and enemies with military might, we are still called to pass down the deeds of God to the next generation. Why? So that that next generation doesn't wander off and do as they see fit. So that they come back to those touchstones and they remember that God is real. God did move. God does move. He is still calling us, and we are still his people. Because we don't want to write another book of Judges in this next generation. We want to be faithful to what God has called. As we build those touchstones and we have the come to Jesus moment at Shechem, and we go, we will, God. We want to be faithful with that as we hand it down to the next generation so that they continue to recognize the might and the power of God. Speaking and showing openly and boldly in different ways through our life who God is, what he's done, and what he can do can help to train the next generation before we are either called home or the Lord returns, one of the two. So it's imperative that we find ways, okay? It's imperative we find ways to reveal what God has done for us and in us to the next generation. I don't know what those touchstones look like in your home. I don't know what they look like in your life. But what are the things you can point to? One of the things that I have made it a point to do is when God speaks or God moves, journaling has become, and I have always done it so that I could look back. But as I've grown as a father and after losing my mother, I found myself desperately pouring through whatever looked like a journal so I could read her story. Can I tell you the value of passing down a written testimony to your children can be the very touchstones that they need to go, I forgot about this. God is true. God is real. It can be the very living words that you leave behind with your own hand that they could read someday and remember. It could be something different. It could be something that something you leave on a wall, something you write out for them. I don't know. I've heard people that handwrite versions of the Bible for their own children. Three-hole punch binders. They sit down and they literally hand copy the Bible in their own writing for each one of their kids so that they have a handwritten copy of the Bible from their parent as a monument. I don't know what it is for you, but we should be thinking of ways that we hand down this lineage, this heritage of faith in some way for the next generation. Our lives should be also lived as memorials for the glory of the Lord Jesus as we pass our faith down. So that not only do they read the words, but they remember the actions, they remember the tone, they remember the gentleness of our touch or even the intensity of our passion for God. Maybe they remember the tears. I can tell you definitively, at 6 years old, sitting in a Sunday night service, seeing my mother come back from the altar, weeping, tears streaming down her faces from having a moment with God. I had no perspective at 6 years old. To this day, I couldn't tell you what was going on in her life. But I could tell you, I remember looking at my mom and seeing tears streaming down her face and going, "Why are you crying, Mom?" And her words have never left me, even in such a young age. These aren't tears of sorrow. Mommy's not sad. And how do you grasp that as a 6-year-old? You don't. But as an adult, somehow that memory of that action of my mom weeping at an altar for Jesus, later understanding the same sensitivity to the presence of God that causes me to weep, I'm now able to look back and go, she was having a moment with Jesus at an altar that rocked her heart. I didn't understand it at 6, but I understand it now. And I remember the tears. I remember the gleam of the trail down her cheek. And here I am scribbling cartoon on the bulletin in the chair while she's up meeting with Jesus. But she was setting a stone. And it was a stone I remember. So I just want to encourage you today, looking at the story of Joshua, this impactful moment that the Lord leads Joshua, he's still leading us into today. We might not cross rivers and have them stopped up. We might. I don't know. But there are moments where God will speak and he'll record this or do this or do that. And if we'll be obedient, it can bear fruit long after we're gone. Right? Any thoughts on that? I know we covered a lot of stuff tonight, but Joshua, for very many reasons, is one of my favorite books as you read the heart of Joshua, the leader, to follow and be obedient and set the tone for the people. So, thoughts, questions before we wrap it up tonight?
One thing that popped into my head is like a testimony that I think about is the movie Jesus Revolution and like the Jesus People movement that like I obviously didn't live through, but getting to watch that movie, and a lot of my friends have watched that movie, and like seeing the testimony of what God did in California in those years is like so powerful to me as someone who I would say is part of the next generation, getting to like reap the benefit of someone who decided, no, this is something we can't forget about, like a movie should be made about it.
It's good. I mean, that's a medium through which it's reaching this generation, right? Thank the Lord for those.
Yeah.
That documentary style movie, right? My mom was raised in Southern California in the Jesus movement. Like, she was a part of that and handed that passion down. Though she was never part of the hippie movement, she was raised in the church during the Jesus movement, okay?
Important distinction.
Anybody else? Any thoughts?
I don't know if it stood out to me as we were reading it, but it seems like with Joshua especially, the pattern of like God tells Joshua, Joshua tells the people, and then the people do it. Like it just repeats the exact same words, the exact same phrasing, but it's like 3 times each time. And that just really stuck out to me of like, it's like, you know, there is the faithfulness of each step. Like God was faithful to command it. Joshua was faithful to relay those words, but the people still had to go and do them. I don't know why that's like sticking out to me and talking to me so much, but like you know, you think about ancient people writing, like paper was really expensive and the ink to do it was really expensive, and so to write it out 3 times every single time Joshua is told to do something is incredibly expensive, and it's an intentional choice that they felt the Lord was leading them to do. And it's like, why is it so, like they could have just said God told them to do it, they did it, but like they really made a point to be like, God said it, Joshua said it. Well,
I think at a certain level it requires multiple engagements of obedience. If at any point the chain was broken, you may not end up in the testimony, right? But God is the one who wouldn't ever break it, by the way. He's not the question in that equation. It's the leader or the recipients of the vision, one of the two, that break it. Inevitably, that's always what takes place, and that's what takes place following Joshua's leadership. And so there is a reality to that model being shown, because after Joshua, that model goes away. The people stop. They stop obeying. They stop seeking themselves. They stop being a part of what works, and that's the obedience, whether it comes from God himself or through Joshua. But now we have a new Joshua. Yeshua, Jesus, right, is the new Joshua. He's the one that leads us into the promised land. And so as the Father brings the word, we see the same thing responded in the New Testament. Jesus said, I speak what my Father told me to speak. I do my Father's will. He's talking about that same progression. He's hearing it from the Father. He's speaking it to the people. And those that obey it are seeing the result. Just like when he told them, look, it's good that I go away so that the Spirit will come. Why? Because now the Spirit is relaying, like Jesus said, he'll speak only what he hears in the throne room in heaven. So as the Father speaks it, the Spirit delivers it, and we become the agents of obedience. And so that model is repeated through Scripture, not just in Joshua. Okay? But that's a good pickup. It's good. All right, anybody else?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
I'm thinking about how like Joshua shared the vision with the 12 and then with the people afterwards, and like why that was, like why did God intend for that? Were all of the people not ready for what Joshua was about to say? Like, did it require the faithfulness of the 12 that the other people would follow like through, or like what was the purpose of two different moments?
I'm just thinking about trying to get a vision moving. As a leader, it's logistical. I'm not going to address the whole people first. I'm going to say select one, send them to me so I can get with you 12, just like Jesus, right? I'm going to get with you 12. I'm going to give you the vision, and I'm going to give you the way this is going to work. Then you carry it out, and we'll get to the other side. Now I'm going to explain. Now we're going to pull everybody together. The heat of the moment, the obedience, the walking through the river, all of that's over. Now let me get your attention. Let me explain to you what took place, why we did this. So from a leadership perspective, it makes sense to me that I'm not going to try to address the whole body of people at one time to get the thing moving. I only need the 12 to accomplish the task that I've been told. We'll get through to the other side. Now I'm going to explain why it's valuable and what it's needed for. And so for me, there could be a deeper spiritual message in it, but for me, much of the scripture is also logical. It's logistical. Oh, God did it this way because it worked best that way.
Yeah.
So.
Dang, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally going to make an analogy to Jesus and the disciples.
Oh.
Right before
Sorry.
you said that.
Yeah.
So there you
go. Yeah, Jesus did the same, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, yeah.
Sorry, one last thing. I like how in the story of those 12, like God tells Joshua to pick 12 people, when they're still on the other side of the Jordan, and but he doesn't tell them why he needs those 12. And then Joshua, he could have just picked the 12 in his mind and been like, all right, those are the 12 that I'm going to have, and I don't know what I'm going to use them for, but I'll figure that out later. But no, like Joshua calls those 12 out, and then they have to wait for the entire thing to get through, and then it says once everyone's all the way over, like those 12 must have been like, all right, I've been waiting here all day, like,
yeah.
What did you need me for here, Joshua?
Yeah,
like my family's already across, just thinking through all that scenario of just like, you didn't tell me why I'm here, but you told me to come over here, and Joshua must have been like, all right, God, like these 12 people have been sitting with me all day, like why'd you ask me to get them? And then it wasn't until everyone was clear that he's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you why those 12, but I don't know, the faithfulness of Joshua to still be like, I don't know why you're going to be here, but God told me to pick you out here, so sit here for a little bit.
And let's think about it from the 12's perspective. You want me to do what? I don't know, I just need one of you. Right? I mean, think about that. I need 12 volunteers. It could be all over the map at this point, right? Yeah. So there's a reality of the, I hate the term blind faith, but the unknown faith. You don't know what's coming, but you're trusting. And and even in that lesson, I think there's something for us, because I think there are times that God says, look, I need the willing heart. Are you willing? Are you ready to go? Will you surrender? Then we cross that path, and he goes, okay, you're going to be a part of something amazing. You're going to be part of a testimony. But sometimes we want the glory first. We want to know what it's going to be. That's not glory. That's not powerful enough for me. That doesn't carry enough news coverage for me. That's not grandiose enough for me. I'm out. But he's looking for the ones that are going, whatever it is, God, I'll do it. Even if it's just picking up a stone, I'll do it. That's the heart, I think, that God uses, and he looks for even still today, the willingness. Yep.
Plus, imagine then getting to tell your kids, yeah, I was the one who got to move that giant rock over here because the Lord told Joshua to tell me to.
And when you believe what it did to my neck, I had to carry it on my shoulder, and it dug in right here.
But my rock was bigger than John.
My rock, you should have seen it. I picked the biggest one. That's totally what I would do, right? Oh, I picked the biggest one.
Somebody from Manassas probably did that.
So, no, these are all great perspectives as we look at the story. And there's a reason God writes through his people with such detail and at times such beautiful language as we look at the different players in the stories and the roles they have and the reasons it's there and the repetition. There's a reason that the Bible is one of the most beautiful books that's ever been bound together in the history of creation. So Sunday, we're going to dive into another passionate leader as he addresses issues on the other side, as they forget this moment at Shechem and they go through all the pain and the hurt that would come from that for hundreds of years. And then this leader addresses it, and you're going to hear what he has to say Sunday. It's going to be a good day. All right? Well, thanks, everybody. We're out of time. Appreciate you all. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see everybody on Sunday morning. Take care.